Welcome to the Chai Center and welcome to the Chai Academy. A new class today on a fascinating personality. This is somewhat aggravating, and I think one of the reasons why it's aggravating is because what happened is true. The story I'm about to share with you was true and sad and unfortunate. We are we are talking about Arthur Dreyfus. So Arthur Dreyfus was a an army captain, right, in the French military. He was a Jew and he was a loyal French citizen. And in 1894, he was charged with treason, the worst offense that you can do against a country, your country, and charged with treason, and essentially, um, you know, they didn't do executions for political prisoners back then, but that's it. Your life is over. You know, you go to prison for life, etc. Now, the how it led to him being charged with treason was really asinine. And you know, you say the wheels of justice do turn. This is the wheels of injustice turns. Essentially, the French government were spying on the German embassy located in Paris, and they had an in there. They had the housekeeper of the German embassy was a spy, and that was a coup d'état. It was she had inside knowledge. Anyway, the story is told is that she intercepted a note that was torn up into 6 pieces, and on this note was basically it said that forthcoming military secrets, the military secrets will be forthcoming. So she quickly handed this to her handlers that there's a leak, there's somebody who's and it seemed to be a military jargon. Somebody in the military is a traitor. So they began to try and find out who is the traitor. They focused on Dreyfus. One reason was they say he was like cold and aloof. Another reason was because he lived in a town right on the border of Germany. He also was a recent captain of the French army. He was just recently promoted, so he sort of was on their radar screen. So they took the note, they hired a professional, which was not professional. Then they hired another professional, which was not professional. And they analyzed Dreyfus's writing with the note's writing. It wasn't a match. So they took Dreyfus's brother's writing, his wife's writing, and they said, aha. So when Dreyfus concealed his writing to look like his wife's and his brother, and that's why it's not a match. But it really is a match. And there were other experts there, so-called experts, and said, this is not a match. This is not true. This is not the case. On top of it, he was a Jew, so, you know, easy pickings, blood cheap as herring. And eventually he was brought in for interrogation. So the interrogator basically told him that we know it's you. He goes, it's not me. It's absolutely not me. I have nothing to. I'm innocent. I'm innocent. The interrogator gave him a gun and said, the best thing for you to do right now, sir, is to kill yourself. He goes, I didn't do anything. Right? So he says, I don't want to kill myself. That makes me look guilty. I want to vindicate. I want to exonerate myself. And anyway, so push came to shove, and they went to trial. This trial was closed. It was a closed trial, and it went on for a very short amount of time, and they found him guilty of treason. The evidence was so sparse, the evidence was really non-existent, but this judges, which acted as the jury, found him guilty, and he was sent in life imprisonment to Devil's Island. You may have heard of it. It's in the French Guiana, and it is a terrible place. You know, it's on an island. They made movies about it. And I think maybe Papillon, maybe he was there. But before they sent him to prison, what they did is they did reveille. They marched him in front of hundreds and hundreds of soldiers, his legions, his battalion, etc. And they stood there, and they came and ripped off his captain stripes and his any patch attached to his uniform. They ripped it off. They made him kneel to the ground, and they shouted at him and said, "This is the worst of the worst." And he was saying, "Ce n'est pas vrai. It's not true. Vive la France. I'm innocent. I'm innocent." And they dragged him to Devil's Island, and he was going to be there for life. This took place in 1894. He was in jail for a couple of years, and his brother Matthew was trying to find a way to get an appellate court to get him out, and he was unsuccessful. So his brother Matthew contacted a journalist, Bernard Lazare, to prove it. And they focused, of course, on the writing samples and the original page. In 1896, new evidence came to light because they found another note. It didn't yet reach the German embassy, but it was a note exposing French secrets. They looked at this note, and it was very, very similar to the previous note in writing. However, they were able to trace down the note to a fellow by the name of Esterhazy, or Esterhazy, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. And he was arrested for treason, and he was brought in front of the court. They showed the papers. They also showed the original note, which it looks like he wrote. He was in a 2-day trial. Dreyfus had a 2-week trial. This guy had a 2-day trial in closed court. The judges spent 3 minutes deliberating. He was found innocent of the charges, and he was sent to North Africa, out of Paris, get out, and he was sent to North Africa, where he was carried on as a soldier. And it was a debacle. So in 1897, they began to, a swell of people started to believe that Dreyfus was innocent. And this was just a witch hunt. And was it based on anti-Semitism? What was it based on? They weren't sure. But there is a theory, by the way. There was a theory that in 1886, a very powerful journalist by the name of Edward Drummond wrote a book, an anti-Semitic book. And in the first year alone, it sold 150,000 copies. Excerpts of the book was printed in various newspapers, many newspapers. And there was this anti-Semitic dark cloud. So that, they think, was the cause. But in 1897, they contacted various political figures. They contacted newspapers. They contacted reporters and journalists to get involved. And simultaneously, Matthew, he went to the War Commission, and he made a formal complaint about this traitor who was Esterhazy, that was not. So he went to the Minister of War. They reopened the investigation, and the story is told that Esterhazy cut his hair, shaved off his mustache, and disappeared into the night. Still nothing helped. Nothing happened in 1897. Arthur Dreyfus, Captain Dreyfus, was still in Devil's Island in prison until 1898. Now, in 1898, a famous letter, possibly one of the most famous letters ever written. You know, there's in the top 100 for sure, top 50 probably, top 10 maybe, and it was a letter, and it was written by Émile Zola. He was a journalist, he was a novelist, he was a playwright, and he had a very successful individual, and he wrote a letter to the premier, the Prime Minister of France, and the letter was published in a newspaper, and it was called J'accuse. I accuse. And basically it was basically lambasting the French government, the French military, as being anti-Semites. And the heart of his claim, and remember, this was a very, very upstanding, successful individual. At the heart of his claim, at the heart of this letter, was Arthur Dreyfus, as sort of as a proof that they didn't have enough evidence, yet they found him guilty, and it was all based on flimsy evidence. We demand a new trial. We demand that this be looked at. The company Émile Zola kept was intellectuals, all intellectuals. So when they read this, this is, by the way, where intellectuals was first coined, was actually in Paris. When they first read it, they began to become aligned with the Dreyfus case, which is called, I believe they were called Dreyfus or Dreyfusophan or something like that. And they rallied to his side. France at that time then became very polarized, and it was polarized, by the way, from 1898 or even earlier, 1896, after the Dreyfus affair, that this Jewish bastard could be treason, not loyal to the country. Until 1906, it was basically, there was a polarizing. I guess we have this in the United States to some level. You know, we have political divides. It was the same thing there. It was a very fragile government to begin with. It was only 14 years of this new government when this hit the fan. So it was hotly debated issue. You had those for Dreyfus, and then you had those who were against Dreyfus. Edward Drummond led the charge against Dreyfus. He's the same guy that published the book and excerpts from his book, etc. And because of Dreyfus and because of this great divide, anti-Semitic riots were all over France. And not only in France, but any land the French occupied. There were riots in Algiers, and deaths. People died from these riots, from these pogroms, and so because of the pressure from Émile Zola, the Supreme Court annulled the conviction, and they held a new trial. Also closed. So a new trial had to be held. It wasn't held by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court just annulled. And they had a new trial, and this time, because the evidence was flimsy, they said, yes, he doesn't deserve life in prison, but we are going to give him 10 years, and he served a few years, and he's sent to hard labor, 10 years of hard labor. The pro-Dreyfus campaign were just furious, and they started to politic that this is an absolute miscarriage of justice. This is one of the worst things to happen to to the French people, and they did not let go. And eventually, the honorable French president pardoned him. So he was still, it's like when the president pardons somebody now, you're still, you're on the books, but you've been pardoned, or commuted maybe is the better word. But it's still when people looked at, and Dreyfus was a persona non grata. So he was pardoned in 1899. It took many years. It took to 1906, where he was completely exonerated, completely. Where they said that this was just and once again, this is falsified, and it was sloppy, and all cars were against him. The general of the army needed to catch the traitor, and he seemed to be the low hanging fruit, and anyway, and it was so he was finally pardoned. What's interesting is the same politicals that finally got a trial for Esterhazy, right? It actually hurt them. So they pushed for Esterhazy, who was the real culprit there. They pushed for a trial, which was for 2 days, and then debated for 3 minutes. Once the trial was over, these people who pushed, who arrested, interrogated Esterhazy, were actually ridiculed, and they said, you try to, save the Jew. So it was just like such bad times. Then, to me, this is the climax of the Dreyfus story. So he was completely exonerated. He was invited back to the army that shunned him, the army that basically, the military, they this guy, excuse me, was in Devil's Island, hard labor. I mean, they destroyed this guy. And they welcomed him back to the army, and he accepted. To me, that is incredible. He accepted. He rejoined the army. He was reinstated, rejoined the army, and he fought in World War I. And he died, I think, in 1935. To me, I think that speaks volumes, because I would be burnt to a crisp, right? I want nothing to do. I would be like Pollard. I would just get out of the country. Let me go to Israel. Let me go. British mandate to Palestine, whatever it was, Ottoman Empire, whatever. Just I want out. Let me go to the UK. I want out. But he didn't. He joined the very army that spat him out. He rejoined, and he became a loyal Frenchman. And that's what he was. And even though they ill-treated him, I mean, his when they arrested him for the first time, they didn't tell the wife, they didn't tell the brother, they didn't tell the family. One day, the French, they couldn't find him. Where's Arthur? Can't get in contact with him. And one day, the military came. They had a warrant to inspect the house, and they overturned the house. She found out by chance that her husband was in prison. And the brother didn't even know. Nobody knew. It was they were treated so poorly. And when she visited him, so they tell the story when they visited him, when she visited him, is that he was placed one end of the room. She was placed at the other end of the room. So there was no touching. There was no passing. And the prison guard stood in between. So they were like talking to one another with somebody in the middle. I mean, it was modern, there was torture. You think waterboarding is bad? Can you imagine? But both are equally heinous in my eyes. So, but yet, he was so honorable, is that he joined the ranks, rank and file, fought in the war, retired from the military, and lived out the rest of his life in Paris. Just, to me, just magnifique. And by the way, it was this story, this sad, horrible tale of years and years of abuse of Dreyfus and of the Jewish community and the pogroms is what awoke Theodor Herzl. He said, we gotta be masters of our own destiny. This will never end. This will never end. And by the way, because of Dreyfus, there were in Western Europe, there was trouble for the Jews because of this story. And Theodor Herzl says, we gotta end this. We gotta find our own land, return to Zion, Zionists, and it was this story that actually catapulted not only Dreyfus, his life, but also Herzl's life. So, but once again, an honorable, most honorable man, who was he was not innocent to proven guilty. He was innocent and not proven guilty, and charged guilty. Terrible story. Truly a blight on the French and the French military, and the legions, etc., etc. Really just horrific. No real words. God bless. Please feel free to see our other classes, thechaicenter.com/academy.